Hey everybody, Andrew here, and it's time for another Spreading the Joy. So, I have a question to ask. Why doesn't anyone talk about Innerspace?
Lieutenant Pendleton is about to be miniaturized, placed into this needle, a new destination. Inside Jack Putter.
Oh, can you hear me?
I'm possessed!
Quaid, Martin Short. Give yourself a shot of adventure. Innerspace.
Innerspace was this really cool, creative, unique, bizarre little sci-fi film from arguably one of the best of the genre filmmakers of all time, Joe Dante. And yet, despite its creativity and the stellar cast and crew behind this and all of its uniqueness and all of its accomplishments, it is a film that I've never really heard anyone talk about or discuss or examine in any real way. And I don't understand why, because this is such a unique, interesting, bizarre film. With Joe Dante, we talk about so many of his films. You talk about Gremlins, you talk about Gremlins 2, you talk about even his lesser ones like Matinee and Tunes Back in Action. But Innerspace just kind of gets brushed aside for no obvious reason. I'm changing that today. I'm going to talk about it because this is legitimately among my favorite films of all time. It's beautiful, it's creative, it's one of a kind. It is Joe Dante's Innerspace. Innerspace came out in 1987. It is directed by Joe Dante. It is produced by Steven Spielberg. Its score is by Jerry Goldsmith. It stars Dennis Quaid, Martin Short, Meg Ryan. These are all huge names that people recognize, and it came during the height of his popularity. This was in between, Explorers and The Burbs. While the premise isn't the most unique in the world, because it is just the plot of 1966's Fantastic Voyage. It is about miniaturizing a vehicle to go inside somebody's human body. But this is so Joe Dante in its production and the way it's done that it's really, really hard to not call this a cinematic masterpiece. Because, my God, this is unique and creative and so insane and so fun. Let's go a little over the story. So, story is, we have a down-and-out, forced into retirement U.S. Navy aviator named Lieutenant Chuck Pendleton, played by Dennis Quaid. And he basically is out at a naval convention when they're talking about, sending shuttles to the moon and things of that nature. And he ends up getting into a fist fight with a couple of the other officers. He gets basically kicked out. His ex/girlfriend, Meg Ryan, sees him, takes him home, woos her by playing their song, and they end up having sex together. But she gets up and leaves in the morning, calls a cab to try and leave. He tries to stop her, but she's like, "You're a man, boy, I'm not. You love yourself, you don't love me," and basically leaves him butt naked in the middle of the road. So we find out that Dennis Quaid's character is working on this secret government experiment in the study of miniaturization. He is going to be a pilot inside this submersible pod, and that he is going to be shrunk down to a microscopic size and then injected into a rabbit to do experiments and do some studies and figure out how this system would work and if we could use this to, cure diseases from a molecular level. Miniaturization requires 2 chips to make it possible. You have 1 chip on the outside and 1 on the ship itself. 1 chip can do miniaturization, but you need both chips in order to re-enlarge something. They do the experiment. The ship manages to shrink down to microscopic size. They put it in a syringe to inject into the rabbit shortly. Before they are able to do so, the lab comes under attack by a bunch of these criminals being led by this butler-looking guy in sunglasses. His name is Mr. Igor, and he has a robotic hand. And they kill off a bunch of the people in there, and they steal the first chip. They go to get the syringe for the second chip, but the syringe is missing. The lead doctor on the experiment, Dr. Ozzy, has grabbed the syringe and is running off. He basically steals a bike, is being chased by Mr. Igor, and ends up in the middle of a mall. Mr. Igor takes out his robotic hand and fires a bullet out of his finger, hitting Dr. Ozzy. Dr. Ozzy, in a last-ditch attempt to try to save Dennis Quaid's character, injects him into the butt of a random stranger. The random stranger turns out to be a man named Jack Putter, played by Martin Short. He's a neurotic, hypochondriac, Safeway cashier. And Dennis Quaid awakes inside the human body, doesn't know what's going on or any of the stuff that's happened, realizes he has no communication with the world around him, so he starts working his way up the system to try and get to the ocular nerve to see what's going on. He gets up into the ocular nerve, he plants a device that allows him to see what the ocular nerve sees, and slowly starts to realize that he's in the body of another human being. Martin Short's character is at his job running the cashier. He's very much a hypochondriac. He's very much neurotic and worrying about stuff. He just came back from like his doctor, who was telling him, he kept telling him, he's like, I keep having this reoccurring dream where I'm at my job and I'm scanning these items and this woman shows up with this bright red hair and I go to scan her items and all of the numbers are like ridiculously overpriced and are extremely high, and it comes out to like,
and it's way up over $100,000. That much.
And she's like, do I look like I have that kind of cash on me? And reaches into her purse and pulls out a gun. And he wakes up screaming. So he's at his job, and meanwhile Dennis Quaid's character starts messing around with switches trying to figure out what to do, and it ends up creating an electrical pulse that causes the scanner to start printing out weird numbers. And then lo and behold, the red-headed woman from his nightmare shows up, and he starts scanning, and it starts coming out to those insane numbers, and that total that he says shows up, and she says, do I look like I have that kind of money on me? Reaches into her purse, pulls out her gun, and lights her cigarette with it, because it's just a lighter. It's not a real gun. But he, of course, starts freaking out, hyperventilating, nearly passes out.
You're coming apart at the seams, Jack. Oh my God, he's completely spaced out.
What the hell is that?
He ends up getting taken into the back room, and Dennis Quaid has gotten into Martin Short's inner ear and attaches a device that allows him to communicate with Martin Short. And he starts talking to him. Of course, Martin Short thinks he's going crazy because he's hearing a voice that literally no one else can hear. And goes to his doctor, and he's like, I'm going crazy, there's this voice, and it keeps saying these things, and I don't understand.
I'm in here, inside you, inside your body.
Somebody help me! I'm possessed!
Good news, Jack. I think we can rule out demonic possession right off the bat.
But this little voice is talking to me.
See, that proves it. Demons talk through you, not to you.
Dennis Quaid's character is like, okay, so, I am a pilot. I am in a tiny pod that's somehow inside your body. Now, you need to go to the lab that I was from and figure out what is going on and see if there's a way to get me out. Because
My air supply is running out. If you don't help me, you're going to wind up with this miniaturized submersible pod floating around your insides with this teeny tiny human skeleton at the helm.
So they go to the lab, starts talking to the people in charge and trying to figure out what happened. And through nefarious means and sneaking listening to conversations they're not supposed to hear.
All right, now look directly at them. Don't turn your head. I think I can beef up the reception a little bit.
In here for a couple weeks, I'm just trying to...
Yeah, I can hear them.
Yeah, I know. Shut up and listen.
Sorry.
They find out that they can't resize him because they're missing one of the chips, and that they believe they know who stole it because there's a rival organization that's been wanting these chips for a while, run by this gentleman named Victor Scrimshaw. And he has his own doctor named Dr. Margaret Cranker, and they wanted the chips for themselves to do their own nefarious means with it. The scientist group is not going to even try to get the other chip back. They're just going to wait.
Well, then we don't really have to do anything, do we? Stolen chip is useless without the one inside the pod, and we've got that one. You build your duplicates. It doesn't matter how long it takes. We can't save him now, and that's too bad.
Dennis Quaid convinces Martin Short's like, okay, so we need to go. Because I don't want to die, and you don't want me floating around in your body, so we need to go. So they go out, and they figure out that Scrimshaw has a number of known associates. One of them is this person known as the Cowboy. Dennis Quaid's character recognizes that name because his girlfriend, Meg Ryan, is a reporter who's been studying the cowboy for years.
Something gets stolen, maybe?
I don't know. Why?
The cowboy.
The cowboy?
Who's the cowboy?
Is he here now?
On his way.
Trying to get dirt and to, expose him for the criminal that he is. Dennis Quaid's like, okay, so we gotta get her involved.
This is Tuck Pendleton's car. Does he know you have this car? No.
Here we go.
Why are you wearing
Lydia,
Tuck
shut up and
Pendleton's jacket?
listen.
You are
Lydia,
wearing
shut up
Tuck-
and listen.
Dennis' character needs help, and they agree to meet for dinner, and he's trying to explain to her, but Dennis Quaid is very adamant of, do not tell her where I am and what's going on. Meg Ryan's character doesn't really buy into anything that Martin Short is saying. Martin Short's character starts to have feelings for Meg Ryan's character, but before anything can really evolve in that, Mr. Igor shows up and knocks out Martin Short's character, grabs him and throws him into the back of a freezer truck, and then drives off in the freezer truck, Meg Ryan following behind them at a safe distance. Igor pulls over at one point. They open up the back doors, and in walks Victor Scrimshaw alongside Dr. Margaret Cranker, and they're both in thick winter coats because this is a freezer truck, and Martin Short's basically almost frozen to death in the back. And they're talking to him and put a little coat on him to try to warm it up, and it's like, we need to get that guy out of you, because he's the only thing that's keeping you in this situation, and we want to help you out. Martin Short isn't listening to any of it because Dennis Quaid is in his ear going, hey, the door they came in, they didn't close it entirely. It's loose. If you get up and run right now, we can get out of here. You can do this.
You're not the same man you were this morning, are you, Jack? Huh? You're better, you're stronger, you're a man in control of your own destiny, Jack. Can you do it, Jack? Can you see it, Jack? Can you see it?
Yes! I can see it!
To the door, pushes through the door, and they're in the middle of a moving highway, and he just starts hanging off the side of the door as they're driving down the street. Victor Scrimshaw and them are trying to pull him back in, but Meg Ryan pulls up alongside it, and he manages to drop down into Meg Ryan's car, and they drive away to safety. Meg Ryan now believes him. It's like, okay, so I'm going to help you. We got to get this work. I know where we need to go. So the cowboy stays at the same hotel every single time he comes into town, and Meg Ryan knows which hotel that is. Her plan is that she's going to seduce the cowboy, and then they're going to follow him and figure out, where Scrimshaw is by that method. Through a bunch of shenanigans and stuff, the cowboy ends up getting knocked unconscious.
Hey, don't knock, just come.
Ah, Duke, the son of a bitch!
Meg Ryan tries to go figure out another plan of what they can do about this. Dennis Quaid is like, well, there is something we can do. It's a little experimental, and it's probably going to hurt, but
What are we gonna do?
I'm going to attempt an electronic stimulation of your nerves and muscles.
I can manipulate the muscles in your face to make you look like the cowboy. And he ends up doing this, and it's this insane shaking and moving of the headpiece, and it's just insane. But he ends up having facial features that are very similar, if not identical, to the cowboy. So much so that when Meg Ryan comes in, she's like, what did you do with Martin? And he's like, I'm Martin. He's like, no, you're not. You're definitely the cowboy. And he's like, no, the cowboy's in there. And she goes and sees the cowboy, and it's like, how did you... And she's touching his face and trying to figure it out. And they end up getting visited by Igor and get taken over to Victor Scrimshaw's. Victor is explaining the idea and what's going on and what they need him for. And he's staring at the cowboy and he's going, something's off about you. I don't know exactly what. So let's try something. So he basically grabs Cowboy by the hands and he's like, the cowboy is known for his extreme tolerance of pain. How about you give us a little example of that? And starts bringing the flame closer and closer to the cowboy, who is Martin Short, and then starts freaking out and starts panicking, which causes the tech to start dysfunctioning because he can't maintain it because of the increased heart rate. So his face starts to switch back, which causes all of them to scream and shout in terror. And eventually he just turns into Martin Short, and they're like, okay, lock them up. So Martin Short and Meg Ryan end up locked up in the basement. Dennis Quaid finally is like, okay, tell her what's going on. Tell her everything. So Martin tells her everything that's going on. As he's about to be taken away to get experimented on, he and Meg share a kiss, and he gets taken up into the lab. In the lab, there's this big, giant robot piloted by a human, and they're like, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to shrink him down with the chip that we have. He's going to go inside you, find the chip that we need, take the chip that we need, and then we're just going to...
Let's re-enlarge.
While it's still inside Mr. Putter?
Why not?
Have you any idea the kind of mess that would make?
It's messy, but it's a lot less work. So they shrink down the robot guy and send him into Martin Short's body. Meg Ryan manages to get out, threatens all of the scientists, gets them to untie Martin Short, and Martin Short tells them to get all into the miniaturization chambers.
Everybody into the miniaturizer.
Everybody into the miniaturizer!
They close the door, and then they accidentally turn it on for a couple seconds before they're able to get the chip out. This causes Scrimshaw and Dr. Cranker to shrink down to the size of children. So they have adult bodies, but small, like miniature size. Meg Ryan and Martin Short try to escape from the building. We find out that Dennis Quaid's character is no longer inside Martin Short's body, that through the kiss, he somehow got passed into Meg Ryan's body, which he notices, and he only knows this because he's like, he can't communicate with Martin Short's character anymore, and he goes down and he ends up coming across a womb with a baby in it, and realizes that he is in Meg Ryan's body, and that is his baby.
Oh, Lydia. I'm a dad.
So he goes up into her eardrum and then turns on his radio and plays their song, which is a song called Cupid by Sam Cooke. And he just blasts it as loud as he can in her eardrums with the hope that she'll realize what's going on. Meanwhile, like, Martin Short is like fighting through guards to try to get out, and he's, you know, yelling at Jack, you know, give me the strength, give me the adrenaline bushes you were giving me before, so I have the strength to get through this, and is actually managing to do a decent job through his own self-belief that this is happening without realizing that, you know, he's not getting those strength and adrenaline boosts that he was getting before. But Meg Ryan ends up hearing the music and figures out what's going on.
In me. And he's playing our song.
And figures out that they passed it through the kiss, so they kiss again, and Dennis Quaid ends up back in Martin Short's body. Martin Short and Meg Ryan end up going down into a car and start to drive away, but in the back seat are Scrimshaw and Dr. Cranker, who, even despite their miniature now size, they start using their ropes in their little hands to try and strangle them. They manage to break free, and Meg Ryan and Martin Short end up getting a ride from the main scientist and back to the main lab. And then Martin Short tells Dennis Quaid, oh yeah, by the way, there's a robot-like person who's inside me as well, and he may be coming after you. And they end up having this big fight inside the body. They end up fighting into the stomach area. Dennis Quaid is like, okay, so Martin, I need you to have a really bad stomach reaction. I need you to get your stomach to get your acids really high right now. So he starts increasing Martin's anxiety to cause these stomach acids, and then
Hey pal, here's how I spell relief.
they managed to make it to the lab, but there was only like a few moments left of oxygen before Dennis Quaid runs out, and he is inside Martin Short's nose now. And so they're like, okay, we got to get the pot out. You're gonna have to sneeze. He's like, well, does anyone have pepper or anything? And he's like, oh, hairspray. I'm allergic to hairspray. And one of them happens to have hairspray, so he sprays hairspray up his nose and manages to sneeze out onto this scientist's glasses. And they find the pod, resize it, saving Dennis Quaid. Cut to the epilogue. We have a wedding where Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan's characters are getting married. They get into the limo, and Dennis Quaid remarks they didn't even notice my new cufflinks, which happened to be the little computer chips that they were all fighting over for the entire length of the film. The driver of the limo walk around, and he's wearing cowboy boots. And Martin Short is staring at him going, that guy looked for... That's the cowboy. My friends are in danger. So he goes over, runs to Dennis Quaid's car, jumps in, and starts pursuing it after the limo.
Jack Putter to the rescue!
Roll credits. It's weird to me this is a film that no one really talks about because it's so weird and interesting and insane. And best way. Like, it's so much fun and so creative and so unique. The concept isn't entirely original. Like, it is basically just the 1966 film Fantastic Voyage. Even the person who wrote the original script admits that it started off as a ripoff of that, but it's like, what if the person was moving around and could react to what was going on inside of him? And we've seen this sci-fi plot done in a lot of sci-fi shows afterwards. Like, even like TV shows like Archer have done this, and Futurama and things like that. But none of them have ever looked or felt or been like Innerspace. Innerspace is its own weird, unique little movie, and I truly love everything about it. Like, everything about the aesthetic and the designs and the way it all works is interesting. The computer chips alone are interesting. The ships are interesting. I love the pod that Dennis Quaid is piloting for the whole thing. It's just this realistic but insane design where it's just this big, meaty pod that has all of these tools and all these abilities that you're like, how did you even figure out to do that? Or why would that be an option that would be allowed? Like, the inner eardrum to be able to communicate things. Like, he was supposed to go inside rabbits. Why would he need that in the rabbit? But otherwise the film doesn't make sense. But it's so bizarre. Like, for the most part, you can accept some of the logic jumps in this up until you get to the face shifting thing, because that one is just insane. You're just like, what? Why? How? Like, that doesn't even make sense, but okay.
Balance. Try to stay calm, Jack.
But it's so fun and so over the top that it's like, I kind of love it. I have to. It's so crazy and fun. I love this film. It's, again, one of my favorite sci-fi films. The directing is stellar. The fact that we talk about almost every other film Joe Dante has made, but this one gets ignored, is so weird to me, because, like, I've heard we talk about The Howling, we talk about Gremlins, we talk about Gremlins 2, Explorers, The Burbs. I've seen people talk about Matinee and Small Soldiers and even Looney Tunes Back in Action. But nobody talks about Innerspace. And I don't know why, because this film is amazing. It's so creative, it's so fun, it's so interesting. It's its own unique story told in its own unique way. There's visuals and imagery in this that will live in me forever. Like, I will always remember that evil robot that they put inside him, and the whole chase sequence through the mall, and him shooting someone through a balloon, and him just popping that kid's balloon for no reason. Like, I remember so much of that stuff, and it was so creative and interesting. Like, this is a film that won an Academy Award for visual effects, and it's not even ever mentioned when people talk about Academy Award winners for visual effects. Suicide Squad gets more talked about because it won an Academy Award than this film does. Like, that's just insane to me, because this film is so great. The cast is amazing. Like, Dennis Quaid is this perfect level of charming and interesting. He does an extremely great performance, considering he spends 99% of the film sitting in a chair. Like, that acting is actually really hard. It's hard to stay and sit for long periods of times like that and not be able to move and get around. You have Meg Ryan being her charming, normal self that you just love. And then you have Martin Short, who gives an amazing performance in this. Like, this is legitimately his best performance. It's one of his best movies. It is up there with Three Amigos. Like, it is just stellar. Like, to me, it's my personal favorite of his. I think it's his best film. And he just owns that role so much and lives every part of it, and you believe every part of it. None of it feels like Martin Short doing shtick. It feels like he really embodied the character, and he has this great balance of being the straight man but also the funny man, and it works so well. I've watched so many Martin Short films because I loved him so much in this that I've watched most of the stuff that he's been in, and he's been in some terrible films. But I usually give Martin Short a pass because he's always usually the best part of terrible films. It's so creative and unique and interesting. Like, the way the visuals are done, that you really, it doesn't even feel like it's a fake thing. If you feel like you're in the eyeball or you're in the ear or you're in parts of the body, like when you see and hear the heart and you see that, it's like, it's so good. and creative and interesting. And even just like the world itself is so weird and creative and interesting. Even the villains, like the villains are all amazing. Like I remember them so well, and they're so interesting and so compelling. Like even little things they do are just so interesting. Like Victor Scrimshaw taking care of his dogs is so fascinating to me in this film, where he's just has these two huge, beautiful white dogs, and he's like going to feed them, and he's like, "You hungry? You hungry?" And one of them goes up, and he's like, "No, no, no bag, never bag." And it's just like so weird, but he's so interesting, and I'm like, I love these villains. Like I wanted more films with them, because they were so interesting and compelling. Honestly, I wish we'd gotten more films like this. I'm amazed Martin Short didn't become a bit more of an action star because of this, because, my god, he is so good in this, and it's just legitimately one of my favorite films. I love everything about it. Absolutely amazing. But that's just my opinion. What do you all think? Do you like this film? Do you hate this film? Have you never heard of it? Let me know what your thoughts are. Happy watching, happy reading. I will see you all next time. Bye.